My name's Doug. I don't know how to use IKEA stuff. So I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is JavaScript-based development. I come from a company called RangleIO. We specialize only in working with JavaScript. We work with financial institutions, actually, but across a lot of different verticals as well. Really, our key goal is to make sure that you understand, as developers and CTOs, et cetera, how to actually use JavaScript in an effective way to help you kind of move more quickly as you look to transition to kind of a more modern tech stack. So what does the current kind of banking landscape look like? Just to kind of set the tone for this. So we have what your customers expect. Customers today don't really just look at banking. They look across all the different apps that they have on their phone, that they're using on their desktop, et cetera. And there's an expectation for user experience that they have. So being everywhere. So across all the different channels that they're using, it's super important that that's done. Being personalized. So, what you're presenting to them is actually relevant to them and not to somebody else. It needs to be a fast experience where that experience needs to, load up very quickly, giving the information that they need in a very direct manner, and then get them on their way to doing what they need to do. And being unique, being different, having a differentiation. And so, being able to do those things is important, but can be, a little bit difficult for banks today. It's hard to adapt to those changing needs based on some of the older technologies that you might start a project and maybe a year and a half later it goes out the door. So what we're looking to do is help you understand how you can get those changes out the door much more quickly using a different technology stack. So what are some of the ways that we can do that? So one of the first things you want to do is start by splitting your technology stack. The customer experience on the front end separated from the service architecture on the back end. And I have some slides later, I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more deeply. You want to promote radical innovation. So you want to be able to move extremely quickly to have a hypothesis, work towards that hypothesis, test against real users, and then actually apply those learnings and continually and rapidly cycle through change. As part of that, as part of the development process, you want to get into the idea of continuous delivery as well. So at Rangle, we do 1-week sprints. At the end of every week, we have working software, and that software, in theory, you could put out to production every single week. So we can talk to you about how to do that, et cetera. And it's nothing proprietary that we have. This is just open source software using it in a smart manner. It's really important to choose a stack that enables what I've just said. So we need to make sure that it enables agile product development, the ability to quickly change and pivot what your software is doing, and to meet the goals of your customers in an effective manner. So when you think about it today, a lot of organizations have multiple channels. We're going to have our app in the App Store. We're going to have an app in the Google Play Store. We're going to have maybe kiosks if you have a retail location. And then you're going to have a website that people are using as well. Traditionally, you're pumping money into each of those different channels because each of those channels would have different software. You're duplicating effort across iOS and Android. In particular, but even across kiosk and web, you can be duplicating effort as well. So, and you can imagine, there's a lot of different requirements. You might have different teams working on it, and you end up with a disjointed experience. The ideal state you want to get to is something where you're putting that effort all into one place. So you have, a web-based user interface, you have a native-based user interface, you have a shared kind of business logic layer kind of underlying that, and then each of the channels gets exactly what it needs to service the needs of your customers. That's not to say that every channel has exactly the same experience, but you do end up with a situation where you're able to adapt to those changing customer needs, but you're only putting money into a single place. So using JavaScript will let you do that. There's a couple different technologies that we use that I'm going to talk about really quickly. Usually this is about an hour talk, so I'm condensing it to 15 minutes. JavaScript allows you to provide that kind of high value across all your digital channels. And it really allows you to get a high reuse of effort, which is important when you think about all the different channels that you need to deploy to, and when you want to make changes rapidly to be able to get it into all the different aspects that you need. So these are the technologies that we work with. Again, JavaScript. Over the last 5 years, there's been quite a different number of them that have come out. There's a lot of fatigue, I think, within developers within the industry trying to understand and keep up with what's going on. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. These are the 3 primary ones that we focus on. So React, JS, Angular, and Node. These are the core of almost everything that we do, and a lot of the companies that we work with, this is their focus as well. Again, there's a lot to say about these things, so if you want to come talk to me over at the networking booth, I can go into depth about all of them, but needless to say, these 3 technologies, all that graph I showed you where we had all the money going into a singular place, shared logic, shared UI, these 3 technologies can allow you to do that. So Angular, at a high level, it's really an all-in-one framework. It does everything that you would need it to do for large enterprise teams. It's built by Google. We've contributed a bunch to it as well. Version 2 was released last year, and now version 4 is out, so they're rapidly going through and improving the product. React is fast and flexible. It's built by Facebook, so when you look at things like Instagram, Facebook Web, Facebook native, Instagram native, Tesla, you name it. There's a bunch of companies, especially from the Valley, that are using this particular technology. It's fast and flexible, but it's a UI library. So a lot of the stuff that you're going to be doing is going to be based on how you want to set things up versus having a framework that's telling you how to do it. Basically, the key benefit, the thing that you want to take away from this, so these 2, especially Angular and React, they allow you to have that single omni-channel solution. They allow you to adapt to your changing customer needs. And again, they're changing daily kind of what people are expecting from you. And you need to be able to keep up with that. And it's going to be much more effective than a traditional development option. So that, there's a little bit about development there, but let's think about, what we're actually talking about. The goal of what we're trying to do is not actually, and I love this quote, it's from the CTO of Tesco at a conference I went to earlier this year, and I leveraged this from him. And it's really, the goal isn't about doing agile development. When we talk about that, people always say, oh, well, the developers, that's something the developers do. It's actually the product that needs to be agile, not the developers. Everybody who's within the organization actually needs to be thinking in an agile manner and think about changing things quickly. So how do we do that? You need to build software and have an architecture that supports kind of moving quickly. So you have your modern cross-functional team. It includes developers, product owners. These are people who are dedicated to a product, business and quality analysts, design, et cetera, all working towards a single goal of being able to rapidly iterate through change and being able to deploy software quickly. So how do you do that? And again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, this idea of build, measure, learn. So you have an idea, you have a hypothesis. What is the thing that I need to build that's gonna kind of move the needle for what I'm trying to do? So you have this hypothesis. Instead of trying to build out the entire thing, let's move really rapidly through a bunch of small ideas, test them with real users, get real user feedback, and then cycle through that. So instead of working 6 weeks to go through and get to, or 16 weeks or 6 years or whatever it is, to get to version 2, get to version 50 in that time. So lots of little incremental changes that are testable, seeing what user feedback is, and then getting to that feedback. So build something, measure it with real users, learn from that, and go back into that cycle again. And again, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So our hypothesis, user interaction, and then kind of trying to build from that. So what's the result going to be? The result is going to be you're able to adapt quickly to changes in customer behavior. You're quickly able to develop web, mobile, iOS applications that you can deploy quickly and make changes to. You can create flexible user interfaces that are highly personalized. And you can be agile in how you deliver value to your product, to your end customers, which is ultimately what everybody's trying to do. And supported by kind of a robust back end, that front end can change more quickly. So an interesting kind of thing, there's me talking about stuff, but I said to my team a little while ago, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I said, I'd really like to be able to, at this conference, to do more than talk about this stuff, so what can you guys build me in 2 weeks? So the team actually got together, and they said, well, it's a financial services conference, so we're going to build you an app. Of course, my Android emulator is I'm doing a demo, so it wouldn't be right if the Android emulator didn't break. But the idea is we built a mobile banking application, UI, hooked it up to a fake web service using Node in 2 weeks. So I'll show you what we built using these principles in JavaScript. This is using a technology called React Native. What it does is actually, so it's all JavaScript that you use to build everything. I'll show you the code here in a second. But it uses native components on the front end. So you can see there was a little bit of a blur transition there. There's me logging in. Hello, Doug, logging into your account. JavaScript is controlling native elements here. So when we think about iOS and Android, typically you're going to be writing in Swift and Objective-C. In this case, all we did was write some JavaScript that's actually controlling both platforms at the same time. So you get that great user experience, you get 60 frames a second scrolling, but you have a singular code base that you're writing across both platforms. If I had the Android emulator working, I would be able to show you there are slight differences that we made between the two. But we go into everyday banking here. We have native graphs. We have some little tooltips that we threw in. I actually said, hey, can we just throw in like 10,000 lines of scrolling so we can kind of go through and just scroll through the application here and see how everything works. I have mobile deposit working as well, so if you come by the networking booth, I can show you on my phone as well. I have a little Barclays fake check that it actually reads and actually does a deposit into one of the accounts. So that right there is the kind of thing that you can do in a couple of weeks using these principles, using JavaScript to build your front end. Again, all this application really needs is a back end to hook up to. So when you're thinking about your more traditional back-end services or software as a services that are available today, for you or your customers to use, you can build a front end using JavaScript that actually connects to that very quickly. The other cool thing about this is the code that I wrote, or that the team wrote, I should say. I shouldn't take credit for it. The code that the team wrote here is easily applicable to the web. All the business logic that we're using here, a couple of the components would need to change, just because we're dealing with the web in one case and native components for this. But the general idea is you'd be able to reuse this code that I built here on the web as well, or a kiosk or other kind of platforms. So you're able to actually really easily use this kind of across everything. So that's it for the majority of my talk. So it looks like we have some questions coming up here. How do I ensure quality for the different OSs and browsers? So that's a really good question. There's a couple different things. Each operating system and each browser needs to be tested just like it has been for a long time. So there's a couple things we do. Usually we focus highly on unit testing. So any application we build, including the one that we have here, is about 90% unit test coverage. We find that combined with a series of small end-to-end tests actually meets most of the requirements. Most of the latest JS, this is the next question, most of the latest JS libraries do not support old browsers like IE8. Most banks prefer to support old browsers, including IE8. How do you bridge that gap? Well, so you can use Angular 1, which does support IE8. Angular 2 does not. So in that case, you you kind of have to choose the right technology stack that's going to be right for your customers. If React or Angular doesn't meet your needs, there are other options out there that do similar things. But yeah, if you know those core libraries don't support you, then you might have to look at either changing browser support or something else. Would I recommend Angular or React for a banking app interface development? Okay, so we've built with both. This one was built with React. It really depends on the team. The answer that I always give to this question is, how do you want to work with your team? If your team is you know, smaller, more nimble, wants to be able to have higher control over the code, I would probably suggest React. If your team is diverse, large, spread over kind of a wide geographic area, Angular is going to give you those guardrails to make sure everybody's working in the same way. Do you really think that weekly releases are equal to pure continuous delivery process? So what happens is, so we focus on our weekly sprints, but everything that we deliver could be released as soon as it's marked as done. So we have a definition of done. As soon as that definition of done is complete, we're good to go. So it could go out continuously as soon as the features are completed. So.